In 1958, America nearly bet its future on an atomic-powered car that promised 5,000 miles between fuel stops, engineered not with gasoline, but with a uranium reactor. Ford's Nucleon was hailed as the dawn of infinite personal mobility. But physics, politics, and fear shattered that vision. What killed the dream before it left the blueprint, and what lessons hide in its silent shell? What if the same power that leveled cities could someday carry you to work? In the years after World War II, American industry leaned into a new promise, that the atom, once a symbol of destruction, could be harnessed for everyday abundance. President Eisenhower's Atoms for Peace speech in 1953 set the tone, inviting a nation to imagine a future where nuclear power would solve not just energy shortages, but the anxieties of modern life. By the late 1950s, that optimism found its way onto the drawing boards of Ford's advanced styling studio. The Nucleon project was born from the belief that atomic energy could offer freedom from the limits of gasoline, an answer to the persistent problem of range. At the time, a typical family sedan managed just 300 to 400 miles before another stop at the pump. Petroleum supplies, though stable, were shadowed by global uncertainty and the memory of wartime rationing. Engineers and executives saw nuclear propulsion as a way to break free from the cycle of scarcity and dependence. The 1958 public debut of the Ford Nucleon was more than a technical announcement. It was a declaration of confidence in the future. Ford's vision extended beyond the car itself, picturing a world where roadside stations would exchange spent reactor capsules as casually as a tire rotation, and cross-country travel would be measured not in gallons, but in years between refueling. This was the era's wager. The belief was that the atom could be tamed for personal use, and that American ingenuity would bridge the gap between science fiction and the daily commute. The Nucleon's promise was not just about distance. It was about redefining what it meant to be mobile in an atomic age. The Nucleon's proportions stretched the boundaries of automotive design. On paper, the full-scale car measured 200 inches from nose to tail, nearly 17 feet, while the only physical model built stood at 3/8 of that length, just 75 inches. The cabin sat far forward and left a long, sculpted rear to cradle the heart of the proposal, a modular nuclear power capsule. This capsule was more than a fuel tank. Designers imagined it as a self-contained reactor, turbine, and drive assembly slotted between the rear wheels. When depleted, the entire unit could be swapped at a service station, a process Ford claimed would be as routine as changing a tire. The Nucleon's operational claims rested on a closed-loop steam cycle. Heat from uranium fission would boil water, producing steam to spin a turbine that powered the wheels. A second, smaller turbine would generate electricity for onboard systems. The steam, once spent, would condense and recirculate, promising continuous motion as long as fission material remained active. Contemporary estimates placed the reactor thermal output near 120 kilowatts, enough in theory to sustain highway speeds for thousands of miles. Ford's promotional literature promised a service interval of 5,000 miles before the capsule required replacement. Drivers could select between different capsule types, some tailored for maximum range, others for higher power. The Nucleon was conceived not as a static machine, but as a system built around modularity and consumer choice. In the blueprints, every dimension and claim suggested a future unbounded by the limits of gasoline, each number inviting the arithmetic scrutiny that would soon follow. Calculations began to expose the gulf between ambition and physical law. Shielding a fission reactor, even a small one, demanded more than clever packaging. It required mass on a scale that defied the very idea of a car. To reduce radiation to safe levels for passengers, engineers in the late 1950s estimated at least 4,700 kilograms of lead would be needed. That figure only covered gamma rays. Neutron shielding using materials like boron or polyethylene would push the total even higher, to somewhere between 5 and 10 metric tons. For context, a typical sedan of the era weighed less than 1,800 kilograms. The shielding alone would outweigh the entire car by a factor of 3 to 6, turning the Nucleon into a rolling fortress before a single passenger stepped inside. Heat, too, refused to yield to optimism. The reactor's projected output, about 120 kilowatts of thermal energy, meant that roughly 90 kilowatts would spill out as waste heat. Standard automotive radiators handled only a fraction of this load. Rejecting that much heat would require a cooling system far larger than the car itself, with surface area rivaling that of a delivery truck. The streamlined tail fins and compact profile, so central to the Nucleon's image, would have been overwhelmed by the bulk physics demanded. Ford's own promotional materials acknowledged this, noting the design assumed future advances would shrink both reactors and their protective shells. But the numbers were not on their side. As Dr. Elena Vasquez later summarized, the math is merciless. Shielding drops the dose, but the weight drops the dream. Federal authority over the atom was absolute. From 1946 until 1974, the Atomic Energy Commission controlled every gram of uranium and every civilian reactor, whether in a laboratory or a power plant. No private company could build or operate a fission reactor without navigating a labyrinth of licensing, oversight, and security rules. The idea of millions of Americans driving around with nuclear cores in their trunks never entered the regulatory vocabulary. There was no legal pathway for a roadside swap of spent capsules, no license category, no insurance, no precedent. Even stationary reactors faced years of review before a single watt reached the grid. The scale of the logistical gap was staggering. Ford's proposal for 5,000-mile reactor swaps glossed over the reality that each used capsule was a high-level radioactive waste package, laced with fission products and special nuclear material. Under mid-century Atomic Energy Commission codes, spent fuel required armored casks, armed transport, and burial at federal sites like Hanford or Savannah River. The cost of handling, shipping, and disposing of even a single capsule ran into tens of thousands of dollars per unit, per swap. No infrastructure existed to process the hundreds of thousands or millions of capsules that a national fleet would generate each year. Public confidence in atomic safety was already eroding. In 1957, the Windscale fire in the United Kingdom released radioactive iodine across the countryside, forcing mass milk recalls and stoking global anxiety. The accident underscored the dangers of even well-guarded stationary reactors. In the shadow of Windscale, the prospect of consumer-operated reactors, unshielded by institutional protocol, became not just impractical, but politically untouchable. Economic reality closed the circle. The capital needed to develop, certify, and ensure a nuclear car program stretched into the tens of millions of dollars, with no clear path to recoup investment or manage risk. Even Ford's most optimistic projections could not paper over a regulatory and financial wall that was, by every measure, insurmountable. The Ford Nucleon exists today not as a running prototype, but as a 3/8 scale model, 75 inches from nose to tail, preserved in the collection of the Henry Ford Museum of American Innovation in Dearborn, Michigan. Built first in clay and later cast in fiberglass, the model was never intended for the road. Instead, it served as a physical statement of mid-century ambition, its bubble canopy and elongated tail fins frozen in time. For several years, the Nucleon model has been on loan to the Atomic Museum in Las Vegas, where it stands among artifacts of nuclear history, an emblem of Cold War optimism and technical bravado. Museum records describe it not as a failed experiment, but as a cultural artifact, an object that invites visitors to measure the distance between what was imagined and what could be built. As one curator remarked, the Nucleon is a monument to possibility, not practicality. Today's electric cars quietly deliver the range the Nucleon once promised: 200 to 400 miles on a single charge, no uranium required. Yet the atomic car's shadow lingers in the numbers. Shielding a nuclear reactor for a sedan-sized vehicle would add 5 to 10 metric tons, 3 to 6 times the weight of a modern family car. Engineers still debate whether advanced reactors could ever shrink that burden, but the physics remains unchanged. The Nucleon's silhouette survives in toy models and faded magazine covers, a symbol of imagination unbound by constraint. The last word belongs to the scale: one sedan, 1.6 tons. One atomic dream, 10 tons of lead. The future, measured in weight, never left the drawing board. Nearly 7 decades later, no nation has licensed a nuclear-powered passenger car. As fusion and fission re-enter energy debates, the Nucleon's legacy asks if safety and ambition can ever truly coexist on our roads. Sometimes the future we fear is the one we quietly choose. Share your thoughts below.